And we are live. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, Blake. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself with this thought, and I know that we've got a lot to recap. But I'm very excited for the Tuesday reaction that we are going to do to the playoff ranking, because right now we are in a position where I don't think that there is any right or necessarily wrong ordering of teams that can go into this top 12. The way that the Big 12 looks, the way that the SEC looks, I'm loving where we are right now, man. I am juiced up. And I know that this past week we hyped it up, or not really hyped it up, but talked about how it wasn't maybe the most exciting slate. But because of what happened, we're getting pushed into like a really, really competitive race here.
I see a lot of people, and look, I don't mind Danny Cannell, okay, at all. I really don't. I
saw
really,
you quote tweeted him earlier.
I really, really don't. But if you're going to talk about that, all right, you got Oregon on the road against Wisconsin, okay, which we're going to talk about here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
South Carolina, you're banging on South Carolina. South Carolina's 3 losses are teams that are in the top 10. Or
right.
At the time, we're at the top 10. Okay? So, anybody want to go up against South Carolina right now? Anybody want to go up against Georgia right now? So, when we get in this playoff, we are going to find out here. So, Penn State, Indiana, Big Ten, better hope that they are able to take on. And, Joe, right now, as it would stand, on where we would think, Georgia would go into Bloomington to face Indiana. Are you sure y'all ready for that smoke?
I think that's the biggest thing that and it's in line with what I just brought up here. It's the biggest thing that I'm excited for, Blake, is to like really learn which conference was the most competitive this year. 14 playoff, we weren't really able to figure that out because you could have theoretically sent the wrong SEC or Big Ten representative, blah, blah, blah. You could have sent that wrong team that had the easier schedule. But now there's so many teams, the potential for 5 SEC teams, 4 Big Ten teams, whatever it ends up mapping out to be. I really want to have that context to know here's the separation gap between the SEC and the Big 12 that we have been fighting tooth and nail every single reaction show. I mean, we talked about that on Tuesday, why the SEC was getting screwed. And I think yesterday really proved our point that the SEC has the most competitive and most talented teams and are going to put out the best product for whoever is going to play in the college football playoff.
Alabama going to Happy Valley. You 1,000% sure that you're taking Penn State at the current moment?
I am not taking Penn State. I wouldn't take.
I'm just saying. Would you feel comfortable taking Penn State at this moment? And here's a great one. You ready? Here's a really good one.
Okay.
Ohio State with your offensive line issues. Are you ready to take on Ole Miss? So those are the questions that we would get answers to at the current moment. By the way, BYU. Told you, Boise State, told you, Joe, I got to ask an honest question. Is Tulane going to be the one that we talked about in reference to being that 12th team?
Tulane is going to miss the playoff, and they're the most deserving of getting in. Boise State is not as good as everybody thinks that they are. They're allowing a singular bad performance. Wait, seriously, this is something that's not been talked about.
You told me during the Heisman and Ashton Jeanty that Blake, he can do whatever he wanted.
I'm talking about Jeanty. Jeanty is their whole team. I'm talking about the whole Boise State team is not balanced enough like that Tulane squad that plays really good defense, and Mensah is a really underrated young quarterback. But nothing that's been talked about with Boise State and everyone saying, look how close they played Oregon. Are we talking about Idaho as a college football playoff team? They're not even one of the best FCS teams this year. They've dealt with some injuries, but Boise State has been unjustifiably propped up. And the craziest, stupidest part is because BYU lost, they could have an automatic bye. They could have a bye. They could be one of the 4 teams that gets a bye because of this wonky ass dipshit organization of how this playoff is set up.
And here's another truth. You ready?
What?
Are you 1,000% sure that Miami is deserving of a bye?
More than BYU or
no,
Boise
more
State
than
would be.
These SEC and Big Ten teams. Like, for example, let's say that Oregon loses the Big Ten title game, and they split. So Oregon doesn't get a bye for splitting with a team that they beat earlier in the year, and Miami would.
Separate from that specific example,
Okay, let's go SEC. You want me to go SEC?
I still think that Miami would be good enough. They didn't play their best game against Georgia Tech, and I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole here before we start the show today. But I would think that Miami's offense is good enough to create a shootout situation against a team like Alabama, a team like Tennessee. I think that they could be a team like Tennessee, the way that we saw how quickly their offense completely fell apart in the second half. I don't think that they could beat Ole Miss because I think Ole Miss's defensive line, which is something that's going to get brought up today when we recap the Georgia game, I don't think that they could beat a team like Ole Miss. Miami, I'm less concerned about getting a bye. I am, just because
I'm just saying, as an example, do you think Miami deserves to get one over Ole Miss? And that's the question you're going to have with yourself.
I think that is not a definite yes or no question. That's why I'm kind of dancing around.
I think it is. I think that we're finding out more than anything. Before we get rolling here, just my final point. I think that we're finding out what really matters in strength of schedule. So I'll give an example. I know that there was an SEC team this week that had a coaches meeting along with their ADs and saying, why are we playing these early matchups? The strength of schedule doesn't matter anyway. Like, as an example, if LSU, what benefits LSU from playing USC week 1? Why don't they schedule a cream puff? Because if you're going to do that for Indiana, if you're going to do that for Penn State or whoever it may be, then you start asking the question, well, why are we doing it? Well, but hold on. We hold the SEC to a higher standard. The truth is the Big Ten has not lived up to the standard of what everybody claims the SEC doesn't do, right? And y'all want the SEC to go to 9 conference games. You don't get me started. All right. Can we get to some of these games?
Yeah, let's get to the games.
All right. So we'll talk Georgia, Tennessee here, Oregon and Wisconsin, Colorado and Utah, LSU, Florida, Kansas, BYU, and South Carolina and Missouri. And then we'll get to other Week 12 thoughts as the show goes on. Let me make sure we don't have any super chats. We do not. Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we come back, we break down the games and break down Week 12. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back. All right. Let's get rolling here. So, Joe, the game of the week, Georgia and Tennessee. Georgia is able to come back from a 10-point deficit and beat Tennessee at home. Your thoughts, Georgia versus Tennessee here, Joe?
Yeah, I think, first of all, biggest thing, Carson Beck played his best game that we've seen this entire season. He played his ass off. The confidence feels like it's coming back for Carson Beck. I understand that it's one game, but sometimes all you need is a performance like that against a stellar defense, one that we talked about in the preview. And many across,
he did throw a really bad interception. We were talking about turnovers.
Right. A lot of people, though, were saying that this Tennessee defense would be too much for him and it would be overwhelming. And the kid looked like a completely different player than everybody was talking about him. Everyone was calling this dude a bum. And I mean, heck, we even criticized him on this show. He should have been criticized for what it's worth. He should have been.
Right.
Okay. Let me finish what I was trying to say. He should have been criticized. He played poorly. Yes, he played poorly. He played better in this game, Blake, and he looked so much more poised in the pocket. It felt like he was able to actually step up to the plate in these third down situations where every other game we would sit and we would watch and it'd be like, here comes the sack. Here comes the interception. Here comes the fumble. He made those plays and converted like he did last year. It felt like there was a lot more of a synchronized harmony between him and Mike Bobo when they've not been on the same page whatsoever. The offensive line played the best game that they have, and it looks like they felt like they were starting to get their flow back together against one of the best defensive lines in the SEC. That version of Georgia is the one that we know that is good enough to win a national championship. This is a year where there is no clear favorite to win the national championship, and we could have a 2-loss team win it. All I'm just trying to bring up here is that the way that they showed out and the way that they bounced back from a bad performance is why I have consistently been high on Georgia and why I have looked past some of their bad games, like the Ole Miss one and like the Alabama game.
So let me start off with Carson Beck. To your point, the scoring drive that sealed the victory for them, Carson Beck on the 12-play, 92-yard drive went 5 of 5, Joe, for 77 yards. He had the back shoulder throw to Humphreys, who had a big catch. He had hit Delp a couple of times there, and then the other tight end. But I thought that I was watching. This is how I felt. Joe, Tennessee was up 10, and I tweeted this out, and our good buddy Graham Coffey, who covers Georgia, had clipped it too right after, and we were just talking about it. There was a play when Georgia was down 10, and they were trying to go down and score, okay? Carson Beck gets out of a sack, breaks 3 tackles, runs the dude over, and gets a first down. From that moment on in the second quarter, something happened with not just Carson Beck. It happened with the entire team. Because I never, after that happened, I was like, all right, so this is the night that we're going to get. Back is up against the wall. We're at home. Night game, Sanford Stadium. Let's go. It's playoff time. Can't be no BS. We got to get this done. Even to the sense of Mike Bobo putting the left tackle, Joe, in the slot.
I loved that play call. That was a great play call.
Great play call. And then throwing the ball into the end zone for a touchdown. Carson Beck played like a quarterback that had everything to lose. He was dialed in. He made the plays. You were not going to deny him. We saw the Carson Beck in 2022. I felt like I saw the Carson Beck in the second half versus Bama that was like, listen, man, I'm having struggles, but I'm not getting denied here. And then Bama comes down, gets a touchdown. That's not on him. Everybody wants to talk about Beck, and I get it. Phenomenal. You got to give him tons of credit, and to Bobo, you got to find ways to get the running game going. I mean, Joe, they're still under 4 yards a carry here, but Tennessee got blanked in the second half. And we keep doing this to Georgia as a team. We keep looking at them as a team and talking about offense, Bobo, offense, Beck, offense, Bobo. What's Kirby going to do? And we miss yet again that they had 5 sacks on Nico. Now, we're going to get to Tennessee in just a minute. But
Right.
the 5 sacks on Nico, he was under duress all night. Chambliss had 2. The inconsistency that Tennessee could block them up front was astonishing all night long. And Tennessee has had these issues, though, Joe, and I will admit, they've had these issues where they don't score in the first half like Alabama. They don't score in the first half versus Arkansas. And then they have these big explosions in the second half. Well, the opposite happened. The complete opposite happened. They got blanked in the second half after Kirby made adjustments. And I think that everybody played and everybody coached like their back was up against the wall and they had everything to lose. It started with your quarterback, but, man, I got to talk about this defense too, Joe. Holding Tennessee the way that they did in the second half to 0 points is a big deal too.
That was my biggest second takeaway, and I think it's the right mix of the offense playing better and then the defense rallying behind it. And you talked about, like, there was an identity shift.
Cohesiveness.
Yeah, we love that word on this show. There was an identity shift, and I'm glad that you brought up the big run that Carson Beck had where he just said, I'm going to run your ass over. And then he had the rushing touchdown as well. That's what I'm talking about there with the confidence that it felt like he had. I wonder how long this lasts. Sometimes all it takes is a performance like that when you're going through a stretch of bad games where you just can't trust your own decision-making. Anyone who's played a sport in a position like this understands what it's like when you are doubting yourself. It's a part of the game of football. It's one of the most mental games of mental sports out there, especially the quarterback position. But that second take that I had is what you just brought up. The defense kicked the crap out of Tennessee's offense. We're going to get to Tennessee in a second, but that front seven for Georgia that we know can be one of the best in the country showed up. The team that didn't really appear against Ole Miss, they took over this football game. They followed the lead of the offense that played really well, and they fed off of that energy when that identity shift happened in the second quarter, in the third quarter, them completely shutting down Tennessee in the second half, as you mentioned, and not allowing anything on any critical drives in the end of the game that could have allowed Tennessee to tie the ball game. That, to me, is why, and what we've talked about in multiple weeks, why they're championship caliber. If they can lean on their defense in outings when the offense isn't playing as well, that's what makes them a national championship contender and why I still consider them one.
Both scoring drives, the go-ahead scoring drive and the game-sealing one, Joe, both were 12 plays. One was 12 plays, 7 minutes long, and it's not as if that they were running the football consistently enough. They just went back to Georgia, though. They utilized both tight ends. They found easy throws for Carson Beck to make, and for what it's worth, I thought it was the best call game Bobo had to this point. But they got playmakers involved. And Joe, I mean, there were some drops in there, and I do think that Beck is struggling with having some weapons on the outside. I do think Anaya Smith is getting popped with some of these PI calls that don't deserve to be PI calls. I feel like he gets one every game. But, look, man, they dominated in the second half, and that's what propelled them. I do think, Joe, for what it's worth, as much as I've talked about, like how good they looked, I was surprised that Tennessee was able to line up and run the football right at them. I mean, like there were moments that DeLeone Sampson just found holes. I mean, Joe, 5 yards to carry every single time. Boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, look, man, I mean, why they got away from DeLeone Sampson, Joe, if I'm being honest, is beyond me if I'm Tennessee. Because when I look at DeLeone Sampson, Joe, he had 19 carries, 101 yards, and a touchdown. Mm-hmm. He had the big one in the first half. And I'm like, bro, you're getting at the 50-yard line. Let's run the ball here. Like, let's line up and run the football. That's what you do. Give it to your best playmaker. And the drops killed them. The drops absolutely killed Tennessee. And Joe, for what it's worth, if I'm a Tennessee fan, I'm looking at the situation, or if I'm just a Georgia fan, I'm like, yeah, Blake, I know that they shut him out in the first half. Tennessee had a lot of drops, man, and they were running the football on us. They were kind of more one-dimensional in a lot of ways. Joe, they had 6 drops in the game. 4 drops in the second half was Tennessee. So there comes a part where I look at this and just say to myself, I love what Georgia did in blanking them. Tennessee also did leave a lot on the table to be desired here too. So, I mean, it's kind of twofold here, but it is what it is.
To take the Tennessee angle, because we're leading into this, my biggest thing with them, they're way too streaky on offense for me to trust them to win a playoff game. They could go out there if they get the right matchup, but dude, I can't get behind this Tennessee offense because they looked great in the first half.
Nor should you.
Right. I don't think anyone, and Tennessee fans, I'm sorry if I'm being too negative. Actually, I'm not apologizing. I'm not apologizing.
There's no reason to apologize.
Yeah. Anyone should realize that you play as good as you did in the first half, and then you can't score in the second half. That's the most literal definition of being streaky. But when we dive a little bit deeper, you talked about all the drops. You talked about all of the lack of execution on critical plays where they needed to convert. And then for some reason, the play calling decision-making, they got away from what was working for them in the first half. I can't trust the Tennessee team. I think they're going to get to the playoff because they're going to have a good resume, and the committee just loves these freaking teams that have good losses, and they're going to find their way into the mix, and they should over a team like Texas or Texas A&M, depending on who wins that final matchup at the end of the year. Tennessee's inconsistencies on offense, it's frustrating the hell out of me, and I'm tired of putting in faith that they're going to suddenly pick up this big gust of wind that is going to carry them to a massive offensive performance that they haven't had since the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you're flawed in one massive area, and it's the one that Josh needs the most to predicate off of what he's doing with the running game. Joe, I got to be real with you. These wide receivers have got to start making some plays here. You got to start making some plays for your quarterback, okay? I don't think Nico played bad at all, if I'm being real with you. I thought there were some throws that he should have made and maybe in some critical downs. But, man, he's getting sacked 5 times. Receivers can't get separation. Squirrel White, where are you? I mean, like,
right.
where are we here? Okay, like you cannot you can't drop the ball in these certain situations. And even looking at the Georgia angle, Joe, again, I love the win, but in the back of my mind, I just need to know, like, Joe, what happens if the first half is happening and they're not having drops? I mean, they had 2 drops in the first half. Both of them came on the same drive. It's not like that they were inconsistently the entire first half in it. So I don't know what to make of Tennessee because I feel like I'm waiting for the bubble to burst, right? Maybe I'm wrong.
They're a year early. They're a year early. We got really excited after a really aggressive start to the season.
Say that. I think this year, I feel like, Joe, if you don't have some of these drops, okay, and you can get more consistent throwing the football, Joe, they're running the football well enough that they can beat anybody. Because if you can do that against Georgia, you can do it against anybody. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. You got to find more consistency in the passing game. Joe, you can't convince me. If they can do that to Georgia, do you think that they can't do it to anybody else? There's no other team in the country that they can't do that against.
It's a very good point. It's part of the reason why I'm saying that, like, the feel for a lack of execution is why I think that they're a year early. I want to bring this up, something that I feel like there was a lot of grandstanding for Tennessee this week coming into the game. And I think since the Alabama win, a lot of people have foregone a lot of Tennessee's inconsistencies because they haven't really played anybody since that Alabama game. Since the beginning of the season, they opened the season 69 points, 51 points, 71 points. They have surpassed 30 points one time in that stretch. 25 against Oklahoma, 14 against Arkansas, 23 against Florida, 24 against Alabama, 28 against Kentucky, and then 33 against Mississippi State. In only one of those games, Nico has thrown over 200 yards. He has been under 200 yards. That was the Kentucky game.
Okay.
So this is something that has not been discussed by anybody. Something that should be more concerning, that this offense that's supposed to be Josh Heupel's calling card, that's not producing.
Yeah, but defensively they are. And I got to push back on you to be real with you. I'm with you on the sense of it's halfway not working, right? Like it's not like that his offensive line's not getting push. It's not like that they're not running the football. Okay?
They are, yeah.
Because they are. I think that he's got some receivers maybe that aren't ready for the spotlight, and they're not executing. They're simply – I mean, it comes down to that, Joe. They're just not executing. Now, do you need to get some of the freshmen, the Matthews out there? I don't know. But you better figure something out, and you better figure it out now because Brew McCoy's not getting separations.
No.
Separation. Nope. He's simply not. But to wrap this up in reference to Georgia here, look, man, again, we talk about this all the time on the show, every single week or every single year that we're in November. Team back wall. And that's the performance that you got. It meant more to one team than the other. Right?
Well,
that's how I felt the entire second half. I felt like Tennessee felt like that they had cushion to make the playoff now that, we can lose one.
Well, that's what the craziest part about all this, and my recency bias is one of the biggest plagues in college football, is that everyone and a lot of people were questioning, and Kirby took this and ran with it, which was a little ridiculous, but a lot of people were questioning, including the playoff committee, Georgia's ability to finish the year strong with their hard schedule to get into the playoff and to not have 3 losses. And a lot of people were crowning Tennessee, it felt like, to just walk right in. And I think that they have a really strong chance, but we were retaught some of these issues that really, really were highlighted. And as you just mentioned there, both these teams had their backs up against the wall at different points in the game. One team responded a lot better than the other did, and it's the Georgia team that I continue to support because I know that when we need them to produce, they will.
I'm going to throw this out there too. Carson Beck went 25 of 40. So I got on Tennessee about it. Joe, the Georgia downfall will be that I don't know if you need a guy on the outside to make a play for you, that I'm not worried that he's not going to drop it.
That's a good point.
Look, Kirby doesn't go in the portal often. Kirby's got to go in the portal, and he's got to go get a wide receiver, a bona fide number one, if he doesn't have one. I mean,
yeah.
Look, man, I still think Humphreys is I like Anaya Smith. I think these PI calls are BS. I mean, like they're hand fighting and he's trying to contort his body around to a back shoulder throw. I mean, like, let the kids play, for crying out loud. By the way, officiating has been so ridiculous in the SEC.
It's been horrible. Conferences, it's been bad.
If he can't, you're letting see, this is what I never understand. Side tangent. You're letting them fight the entire way, all the way down the field. And when he pushes off, when he puts his hand on the DB's back and then swims him and contorts his body, that's not PI. It's not PI. If he's got his head to the ball, both of you are playing the ball, right? Like, I mean, it's just it's BS.
I don't disagree.
Oregon and Wisconsin. Joe, Oregon goes into the Midwest, goes into Wisconsin, and is able to hold on here, 16-13. Your thoughts on Oregon being able to hold on against Wisconsin? Oh, wait. I just forgot something.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, on Monday this past week, you and I broke down Oregon and Wisconsin, did we not?
Yes, we previewed it, and we did it very accurately.
And it's interesting. Your boy got a little bit of pushback. Oregon fans did not like me thinking or saying that Wisconsin's secondary wasn't good. But you know what? The game played out that way. Hit it. Joe, there's one thing in this game that I'm going to be interested to see. That Wisconsin secondary has been very sticky. They're sixth in the country in pass defense. I know it's the Big Ten, but it's not like, look, man, Wisconsin gave Bama problems. So I look at that and say, Joe, as we come back into this one, your thoughts on what you saw between Oregon and Wisconsin?
One of the statements on Oregon that I have repeated constantly throughout this year is that Oregon is the most balanced team in college football right now. What balance means is not that they're just going to come out and dominate every single opponent they're going to play. It means that when you have a matchup against a team and one side of the football is not playing to its potential. And in this game, the offense was not clicking the way that we know that it can. Their offensive line didn't play as good. Receivers were not getting open as consistently as possible. There were a number of coverage sacks, and just in general, Dylan Gabriel, not as sharp as we've seen him with that one bad interception that he had in the red zone. And again, those number of sacks that he took. But Oregon needed to call on their defense to win them the football game. Late in the game, throughout the entirety of it, their defensive line made huge plays. Mateo Uyunglele needs to be talked about more as a budding star and a potential first-round pick along this defensive line. The guy did everything. Sacks, tackles for loss, had a freaking interception at the end of the game. Mateo Uyunglele is fantastic among a group of defensive linemen that have killed opposing offensive lines. So I come back to this, and to say what I'm saying here, Oregon's balance helped them win this football game, and it's going to continue to help them. We see it in different degrees against different opponents, and their ability to lean on one side of the football 1,000% helped them.
You're right. Wisconsin got pressure on Dylan Gabriel 13 times. Now, Gabriel, Joe, at the end of the game, did have a very crucial run that's pretty much, from a time aspect, somewhat sealed it. But he was under pressure a lot. 13 times is a lot. He only got sacked twice, though. So 11 times he either threw it or got away from it and was able to make a play. I agree with you. He wasn't sharp. Well, he wasn't sharp because, number one, these were coverage sacks. So or coverage pressures, I should say. So when I look at this game, I just go back to exactly what we talked about in the preview. Joe, this Wisconsin secondary is pretty good. I'm just going to be real with you. Like, Joe, now they're going to be in the top 3 in passing yards allowed per game this week. You faced a really good secondary. What they do on their back end, the way they communicate, the way they play man, they shift off. They do a lot of different things. Joe, they're one of the best teams in the Big Ten that I've seen, or really just in college football that I've seen. There are a lot of times that they show you something, and at the snap, when you're in your drop, they're in something completely different. And one thing that I think that Fickle does not get a lot of credit about, Joe, do we remember Sauce Gardner and the boys at Cincinnati? Right? Like they did the same type of stuff that you're seeing now Wisconsin do. They don't have the dudes up front yet, okay, to establish and be good enough to do what it is that they need to do. Now, Wisconsin fired Phil Longo today. But I kind of felt in the beginning of the week that there was going to be a situation where, hey, man, you're going into a very cold environment on the road. You might have to go out here and pound the football a little bit, okay? Are you willing to do it to win a football game? Now, Joe, offensively, this is how their series went. They started off with a punt, an interception in the red zone that Dylan Gabriel was the only pick that he had, a field goal. Wait. I had 2 interceptions here. He didn't throw 2.
Yeah, he only had 1. He only had that one early on in the game.
Field goal, punt, end of half, punt, TD. When they needed to line up and run the football, here's the truth. Against Wisconsin, they couldn't do it. Now, you look at, when you look at James's stats, you'll say, well, Blake, he had 121 yards and a touchdown. Well, I'm actually looking at third down because you were 5 for 15 on third down. And when you got into the second half, you tried to run the football in these short yardage situations and you couldn't. So I look at offensively, yes, you're right. They did have issues. But I'm going to use the line that you tell me all the time. You ready? I'm going to take your advice. Good teams find ways to win on the road. And it's no different for Oregon. We see a lot of teams that, look, man, you're going to have games like this. You're going to be met with adversity. We talked about, Joe, you literally led off this segment with it on Monday. When did they get tested? And so this was the week that Oregon got tested. And you know what, man? The number 1 team in the country found a way to win. And it was what you talked about to start off. Defense, man, they kept just getting after Locke. Joe, they could not run the football effectively in big moments either. Walker did have 97 yards, but, man, they got pressure. They made big conversions. Wisconsin was 1 for 12 on third down, okay? The defensive gurus galore. Just watch what Dan Lanning did with Oregon. So, tough game, tough environment, beat up. That's what I felt like I was watching too, Joe. An Oregon team that looked beat up, okay, and they met a physical football team. They got some injuries. Now they go into a bye week. It's been a while since Oregon's had a bye. So you get a bye week, you have Washington, and then you have the Big Ten title game. Joe, the bye is really nicely placed here too. So, again, I felt like a team. I felt like even with some injuries, just as a team, I felt they looked a little beat up, but they were able to find a way to win.
Yeah, so you just brought up there the kind of like my final takeaway from this is that you're escaping a difficult situation. You're on the road and you have this long streak of games where you're not afforded much of a break. I forget when their last bye week was.
Early October.
No, it was in September. It was week 4, if I'm looking at this correctly, because they played a game.
The last week of September.
They played a game on the 14th, and then they played a game on the 28th. So they instead of playing a game on the 21st, that was how long that they went without getting a break.
How many games did they have from bye to bye?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 games. 8 games in between then. So for you, right? So to what I was going to say is that for you to get through that stretch and to get to this final point where you have to go on the road, that's a really difficult situation. I'm not trying to crown this as some situation where Oregon stepped in and they've set themselves up to win a national championship because they beat Wisconsin. I'm not going to go that far. I think that would be a heinous level of glazing if I were trying to make a take happen like that. But to overcome that, on the road, your offense isn't playing as good as it could. You lean in a certain direction. It helps you win the football game. You get the bye week. You're playing up against your rival, Washington, in 2 weeks. You get a week to prepare for that. That is a game, and I believe it's also at home, that you should kick the crap out of them, and then you should walk right into that Big Ten championship game for that rematch with Ohio State with all of the momentum on your side.
So to the point, again, I felt like a team that was exhausted. I felt like I saw a team that was exhausted. Mm-hmm. And for Oregon fans, I'm going to tell you, it's better to get out of there with a win, get a bye, Go into the last game and be prepared. You need this week. I'm sure I didn't listen to Dan Lanning's press conference, but I know Coach speak. I guarantee you he's happy that they just hit a bye week and they went unscathed here. Yeah. I mean, especially down the stretch. That's impressive, man. That's really impressive by Oregon that you're able to go on an 8-game stretch before bye week and do what you need to do. So good on them, Joe, for doing that. All right, you want to get to Colorado and Utah here?
Yeah, let's do it.
Joe, Colorado versus Utah really starting to shape out the Big 12 here as Colorado comes away with a big win. Now 6-1 in the Big 12 is Colorado, the playoff contending Colorado Buffs with Coach Prime.
We're going to get to BYU in a little bit, and I said last week, and I said it very confidently, and look what happened in the late night slate of games. I said that BYU was overrated, and they couldn't get the job done. Again, we're going to get to that in a little bit. I think I was reassured, and I saw a lot of clarity in believing that Colorado would truly be the best representative for the Big 12 to go to the playoff. And it's for two reasons. One, they're the only team in the Big 12 that has the defensive line that can create pressures and can stop the run. They had 9 tackles for loss. They had 4 sacks in this game. And you watched on a snap-to-snap basis the pressures that resulted in creating the 3 interceptions that Isaac Wilson had. On top of this, when you play really good defense up front, the way that they're able to distribute the ball to different playmakers on a snap-to-snap basis and even on special teams, we saw a number of big returns in this game from different guys. Just the ability to rely on so many different athletes is what makes this Colorado squad so different from the rest of the Big 12.
Especially in that conference. In that conference.
Exactly. This is something that I've brought up in draft perspective in a draft perspective on this show. The Big 12 does not have the same level of just general talent as other conferences, and Colorado is the singular exception to that. They have playmakers 4 deep at receiver that you can rely on. And I've mentioned Augustave, who didn't have a crazy big game. He only rushed for 59 yards, but he had a long 37-yard rushing touchdown where we saw the burst that he has and what he can be as a facet to this run game. Colorado just continues to be impossible to keep up with, and there's a couple other takeaways that I have with them, but we were very quickly reminded of why they were favored so heavily and why we picked them to win this game.
So 2 things. Number 1, before I talk about the game here, Travis Hunter is not from this planet. I'm pretty sure that he is from the planet Mars, that he came down in those UFOs. By the way, you saw this week that apparently UFOs are actually real. He came in one of the – you didn't see the Senate hearing committee thing? Anyway, so it was all over Twitter. That's the only reason that I know.
I don't trust Twitter.
Probably shouldn't. Well, I mean, it's in the – anyway.
Okay.
He's not from this planet. He had an interception. He had the ridiculous catch. He had the technical run for a touchdown. He had 5 catches, 55 yards. I mean, he went off. He showed us what it looks like for a high premier athlete, Joe, to like, if you see a premier athlete in the Big Ten or the SEC, okay, that's what it looks like when a guy like that plays against the Big 12 every week. That's exactly what it looks like. But he's doing it on both ways, man. He had a PBU and a pick. Like, and that's the thing. He is the unicorn amongst unicorns at the current moment. Joe, it's the turnovers, man. I mean, it's great. Colorado, in reference to the game, Colorado was able to generate those turnovers. You know, the pick by Hunter, the one down the sideline that Wilson threw. It was also that he made very poor decisions, meaning Wilson. And Colorado just kept capitalizing on it, man. They kept capitalizing on it over and over and over again.
It's a sign of a good football team is that when your opponent makes mistakes, is you ride that momentum and you turn it into points. And that's what I want to. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I want to bring this up too. We give a lot of hype to Travis Hunter, but DJ McKinney, who plays opposite of him, number 8, had a phenomenal game, and he's somebody who a month ago on the draft show that I do, I gave him a little bit of love because I think that he's not getting enough recognition. He's a tall, long kid. He's great in coverage, and he's great when the ball's in the air. He's somebody who paints this whole picture of why this defense has been so productive lately.
Well, if we're going to give praise to Colorado here, I'm not going to even go with a player. I don't think Shedeur deserves a lot of credit for everything that he does.
Mm-hmm.
However, here's the God's honest truth. Joe, Colorado is tied for first in the Big 12. And we got to have a massive conversation about DeLeone. Look, man, I didn't like a lot of the antics in the offseason. Okay, I thought there was too much out there. Doesn't matter right now. They're going on the field and they've played. In week 1, we talked about this. Joe, with the game that came up, I felt like that I had heard nothing about them since camp started. There's no outside drama, nothing going on, and we had a whole segment about it. But, man, what DeLeone has done at Colorado, he has taken a one-win team, and now we're talking about them in playoff conversations because that is where Colorado is right now, winning the big – even if they weren't. Even if they were not in playoff conversations, okay, the simple nature that not only have they made a bowl game in the second year of DeLeone, not only are they potentially going to win the Big 12, that would have been big enough in and of itself that you would have to have given DeLeone credit because look what he took over. I think, Joe, we all went into the season thinking that Utah was going to be the team to beat because we all thought Cam Rising would be healthy, even though somebody on the show kept warning everybody, but I don't know. That's the storyline of the Big 12. That right there. Now, they have 2 losses. It is what it is, but they have 1 in-conference loss. Joe, they can run the table here and get into a Big 12 championship game and win this thing. And we're talking about them as a playoff contender. So I wanted to give Travis a lot of love for what he did. But this win, because it's Utah and they've been winning the Pac-12 and playoff contenders, that's the biggest thing. You really are sealing the deal on what was the favorite coming into the season here, regardless of their record.
Yeah, the way that this has shaped out has been tremendous, that they were able to capitalize and play the way that they did against Utah.
Deep, wide receiver, dude. They're just so deep.
That's the biggest thing. I mean, there's so few teams in the country that have as many receivers that they can rely on and weapons that they can rely on. They got remaining, by the way, just to look ahead a little bit here. They've got Kansas on the road, and then they get Oklahoma State at home. Both accomplishable, winnable games. That's funny that Oklahoma State game is on ABC at noon on rivalry weekend. That's funny that I mean they're going to kick the crap out of Oklahoma State. I don't think that's going to be a very fun game to watch. I wonder what they're going up against in that time slot. But 2 winnable games that they should set themselves up to go on to the playoff and win the Big 12.
Well,
I do not think
I'm not going to say win the Big. Joe, they still got to win it here. I mean, like
I know that they do, but I just don't think that there's what makes a good playoff worthy team and a team worthy of winning their conference. You need to be great in a certain area. No other team in the Big 12 right now is great in a particular area. They're average. All of these teams that we have spent the whole season talking about, that are still in the conversation. Iowa State, Arizona State, Kansas State, who's now out of it. Baylor, by the way, snuck their way up, like breathing down some people's necks, but they're not in the total scope of things. They're too average for me to feel like that those teams are deserving to win the Big 12 and to go on and be competitive in the playoff. That's why I started this segment by saying is that the best representative for the Big 12 has to be Colorado, because I could see a world where they have a couple of big splash plays that helps them win a game against a team like Indiana. Win a game against I don't know if they'd knock off an SEC team if they're really built, their offensive line's really built to take on a challenge like that. But there is a possibility that these receivers that we keep hyping up could completely take over and have a huge performance.
Yeah. Okay. So calm down. All right. When they get in there, they calm down.
I'm not being crazy here. I didn't say that they're winning a national championship. No, I'm just saying that
Ole Miss, good and goddamn well.
Well, that's why I said I don't think that they're like Ole Miss. We saw what Ole Miss did against that Georgia offensive line.
So there's a strong possibility that they would have to take on one of these SEC teams. Stop.
I know, like Tennessee's not a good matchup for them. Ole Miss isn't a good match. But again, team like Indiana is a winnable football game for them. Penn State, they could beat Penn State. I think that they could beat Penn State if they turn that thing into a high-scoring shootout.
I'm not there yet.
Okay.
But let me transition here and out of Colorado because we do have a massive game in the Big 12 this week. Arizona. So I had an 8-game lead on you, and then all of a sudden here comes Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham to save your ass.
Yeah.
BYU does take on, and we'll talk about BYU losing to Kansas here, but BYU does take on Arizona State this week. The winner of this game likely will be going to the Big 12 title game. And BYU, I'm just going to throw this out there, has Houston to end the season. And that's not – Willie Fritz has done some crazy things in his times. But, Joe, to stay in the Big 12 really quickly, BYU did fall to Kansas last night. Your thoughts on that game?
This is the whole thing that I've been saying with BYU. And I was met with resistance when I pointed this out. Their accomplishments to this point have been great. It's been a fun story to track. But they were the least reputable team that was being put in the top 10. At least Indiana was blowing the doors off of every single team that they played except for Michigan. BYU was scraping their way through most of their games, and they had 2 good performances. The game that they played against SMU, which for some reason gets propped up as some huge, amazing victory when it's just a boosted G5 team. SMU is not as good as people think that they are, and I'm going to keep pushing that with both BYU and SMU.
Well, neither is Boise State, and we got them in the top 15 too.
Okay, and I agree with that as well. What I'm trying to say here is that nothing that they did was exceptional. They were extremely average. Jake Retzlaff is a 50-something% quarterback, and we're acting like this team is built to be a juggernaut in the Big 12. They were winning a bunch of close games and playing sloppy football in a number of outings that they had, and we're supposed to expect them to go on this immaculate run. It took one matchup against a team that had a little bit of creativity on offense for them to finally lose and to show where their deficiencies are. I don't think that they're built to beat Colorado. They have been one of the luckiest teams in college football. And the biggest piece here, Blake, there is an enormous difference between good teams and average teams with good resumes. We acted like they had some amazing resume because we allowed a number of media people to talk us into it. I wasn't one of those people that got talked into. I saw through it, and finally, reality set in.
More than anything in this game, so we can break down the game if you want to. More than anything in this game, Kansas just had more athletes.
That was the biggest thing that I noticed. But that's supposed to be how is Kansas, a 3-win team coming into the game, have more athletes than BYU, who's the number one team in the conference?
Regardless of what anybody wants to say, here's the truth. The only pushback that I give on you about BYU, I know turnovers are very streaky, but Joe, they did it for 10 straight weeks, right? Or 11 straight weeks. So I get to a point where, they've done it all 11 weeks. Like, why am I supposed to assume that it's going to stop? They just don't. They never had athletes. They were so fundamentally sound. And when they had a guy that could take a pitch quicker to the edge than the other guy that we have on our team, it backfired. Neal getting to the outside, Daniels getting to the outside. Mm-hmm. Grimm with the 77 yards receiving. One team just had more dudes. And it wasn't anything special that anybody was doing.
No, that's my whole point.
So, to your point, it's a bad matchup with them against Colorado. So, coming off this Big 12 run here, I do think that they were poorly coached in this game, though. And I think that they've been poorly coached the last couple of weeks. In reference to, I think that they got to stop, playing keep away, too. You needed points. You needed to go beat Kansas, and you're going on this long, immaculate 10-play drive, and I'm like, all right, well, if you only get a field goal here, you're not going to have enough time. You better start picking it up a little bit.
Their defense also hasn't, again, we bring up the turnovers that they've been able to produce. They've had a lot of turnover luck. Their defense isn't so good that they could just be like, let's go on a slow drive and then lean on our defense. What?
Well, in fairness to them, though, okay, they gave up 17 points. And it's not like their offense got them anything really worth the damn.
I think it's a 3-win team, though.
Oh, Joe. So there's no team in any conference, okay, that if you say, hey, guys, listen, we're going to have an off day. We're going to give up 17 points. We need you to get 18. We need you to get 18. I mean, so I get what you're saying about them defensively. Joe, better athletes made better plays. Sounds good. You gave up 17 points.
Okay.
I mean, like, you get what I'm saying, though? Like,
yeah.
What am I trying to rip on the defense for when you only gave up 17? We had an off day.
Right, fair,
why doesn't our offense pick something up? So, again, I thought it was a very poorly coached, and, well, BYU is going to give it to Kenny Dillingham squad, and I'm just going to tell you, I faded Kenny Dillingham this week.
Don't make that mistake
again. Won't ever do it again. So here we go.
I'm going to end up picking – I'm telling you right now, I'm picking Arizona State this week.
Oh, me too.
Good.
By the way, as soon as I had an 8-game lead, I lost an 8-game lead.
You started talking shit before the week ended.
I mean, in fairness, you picked it during the show.
Yeah, so, I changed my mind.
I mean, we both went 9-1 this week, by the way.
Big week.
Big week. Big week for you boys. All right, I'm pretty sure 9-1. All right, let's get to I like this game. Your favorite team, Joe. We got two more games we got to talk about here. Your South Carolina game.
Oh, stop it.
And Shane Beamer are able to take on Missouri and win a hell of a drive at the end by Lenora Sellers to win it. And here's what I'm going to tell you, Joseph. I told you last week, I'm going to keep telling you. This is what it looks like when players are being developed in season and getting better. That stops and starts with Lenora Sellers. I don't care what anybody tells me. What that kid has done since the second bye week, Joey threw 5 touchdowns. I mean, I look at Nick Harbor, and I'm like, is that Nick Harbor on a fade route?
The one that didn't do anything for the first couple games.
Couldn't do anything. And now here he comes. And then you know what? An option route to win the game for South Carolina. Not only does Lenora Sellers make the right read, he makes the right play. He makes a great play. And Rocket Sanders goes into the end zone and wins. Joe, I can't believe I'm going to say this. They have been very well coached the last month. Whatever Shane Beamer and this staff has done, I just see a team getting better every week. I know that people think Missouri's flawed. Joe, Missouri was finally healthy. Brady Cook was finally back here, and he didn't look off. I look at this game, and I look at it, and I'm like, man, you couldn't get the running game going, and that's the worst thing that you could have had done to you offensively. And Lenora Sellers goes completely off and wins you this football game.
That was the biggest thing for me, Blake, is what you just talked about there. What has made them improve so much on a week-to-week basis has been that development for Lenora Sellers. And you and I got into a shouting match over the offensive line, and I think that our argument that we were having really lacked substance toward the end of it. Part of what I was trying to get to that we never really got to when we were arguing with one another, I was pushing back that I thought that the offensive line had slightly improved and there wasn't some vast improvement like you were trying to say. My reasoning for that is they've
given up 2 sacks in the last.
Wait. Let me finish what I'm saying. The reason why I was not all in on your statement is that I think that the reason why Lenora Sellers has been sacked less is that his pocket presence, his poise, his awareness, his decision making has gotten significantly better on a week-to-week basis. And we saw that in this game. There were a number of snaps where, like I was trying to argue with you coming into this matchup, going up against a defensive line that had been disruptive against some of its opponents for Missouri, that they got home. I mean, they almost stripped Lenora Sellers on a play in the game that they were able to luckily recover, and it didn't turn over to Missouri. They were able to get pressures, but Sellers was able to break those pressures or to evade it and to produce positive plays. That's what's making this team better. It goes on his shoulders. And when they had that stretch where they lost the LSU game and they started to sputter was when he goes down with the injury. And when he was banged up. Now that he's healthy, you can see the confidence in a young man that's getting better every single week. I attribute a lot of their success to him because he has been phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't all go down. I mean, Sellers had 14 carries for 45 yards. Probably should have had right around 60, 70 yards.
Mm-hmm.
But look, Joe, they're a tough physical football team. Their defense had an off day in certain areas. I mean, they got run on a little bit in the interior. The Missouri offensive line stood up for once, and I thought that they played well. I felt like that you had two teams that really had a lot to play for. And, Joe, I'm just going to tell you right now, one of these SEC teams is going to get left off for one of these teams that's got an automatic qualifier, and it might be South Carolina, and I just don't know if South Carolina couldn't beat these teams, like legitimately. And look, they had, when they needed their playmakers to get involved, Kennard got a sack late. Joe, it was what ultimately led them. He got a sack late. Then Rocket Sanders and then Lenora Sellers. When their big guys had to make plays, Joe, they continued to shine. The final drive, I know I mentioned it earlier. I've never seen a quarterback go from the way that he looked early in the season to have some of the progressions that he's having right now. Defense, I mean, Kilgore had the interception late to seal it. But, I mean, look, man, Joe, they're finding ways to win. They're one of the scary – Joe, there's nobody in the country that wants to see South Carolina knocking on their door. Nobody. Because they can beat you right now in a lot of different ways, and they're a physical football team. We can talk about all we want to that these other teams can beat them, and maybe they can. But, Joe, I'm going to keep saying it every single week. They can ground and pound you, and now they can throw it a little bit, and that defense is still really good, man.
Okay, well, here's a really shithead response to what you said. Sure, I don't disagree with you that teams don't want to face them, but they've got Wofford, and then they play Clemson, and Clemson's not even like really in the ACC race. So it's not like they're not playing for anything of consequence. You know, they're not a playoff team.
I disagree there. I disagree because there's going to be a situation when you look at a team like Tennessee, and I say, I got to be real with you. South Carolina does have one more loss. The problem in that loss, okay, is that I look at Tennessee and say, well, they have more ranked wins over them.
Why do you have to make me be the bad guy? Like I feel like this is like
they're going to finish above Tennessee.
Hold on a second. I feel like outside of South Carolina fans are going to agree with you because you're telling them that there's a chance they could go to the playoff here. But everybody outside of the scope of South Carolina is going to agree with me that they're not getting into the playoff.
What happens if LSU doesn't get that bad call on Nussmeier and they're 10-2?
Then they'd be in the conversation. I don't like doing the if and or situation.
They're a very, very bad call from an LSU guy. A very, very bad call away from being a 10-2 football team.
I don't think that the committee factors that into their decision making, and I would hope that they don't.
No, that's bullshit. Because they tell me every week that their number one criteria is eye test. That's why that they're not doing the strength of schedule. So the criteria that you have laid down to me is based off of what my eyes see. Okay, well, that's bullshit, but let's just say it is eye test. Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't. They're not a playoff team. They're not. I'm losing my mind over this. They're not a playoff team.
Joe, you are dead. Joe, I'm telling you, you are dead wrong on this. You are dead wrong.
They're not a playoff team. They're not.
Tennessee does not. You can say the Bama win. Okay. South Carolina has more ranked wins than Tennessee. They do. So you look at Tennessee's entire schedule and you say, what? Tennessee gets to play Mississippi State when South Carolina with the hurt Lenora Sellers, what?
So they're not going to – they've got – what's their ranked win? They've got one ranked win over Texas A&M, who if Texas A&M
they beat LSU when LSU was top 10. Which we're going to talk about LSU next.
But we're not building a playoff ranking off of like what could have happened. That's insane.
Okay, then what the fuck are we doing with Indiana? Because it's not fair.
They're undefeated.
It is not. I don't give two shits what they are. The biggest
This is too much SEC bias. This is like, I'm sorry, man. Like, I agree with you on a lot of things.
No,
I can't get behind this. They're not a playoff team.
Okay, so Indiana can have the 120th ranked strength of schedule, and it doesn't matter. They have the 102nd strength of record, and it doesn't matter.
You have okay.
I
literally have a pulled clip of
Midwest
this.
Bias.
I'm not from the Midwest. I can't have a Midwest bias. That doesn't make any sense.
You hate the South.
I don't hate the South. I have nothing against
the
South.
weekend in the North.
I'm trying to be balanced about this conversation. You have to win. You have to win the games that you play. I literally have a cut clip of this from last year that I put in my reel. That is me arguing with you, saying that you have to win the games that you play. That's nice that they almost beat LSU, and this has been a good story to watch. But in an 11
and 12 team playoff, though, Joe.
You can't send South Carolina to the playoff. If there is an option to not send a 3-loss team, you shouldn't send a 3-loss team. You shouldn't.
I think that they're better than Indiana. There, I said it.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, let me tell you what would happen theoretically in that game. Indiana would line up, and the most physical team that they faced, Joe, the toughest team that Indiana has faced to date is Michigan. Toughest. I didn't say best team, the toughest team. And I see South Carolina, and I'm like, they about to get their ass smacked. This is about to get bad. So
I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all.
You're a homer.
There's no hope. There's literally, I cannot be I am so non-homerish on this podcast. I shit on Notre Dame when we do Notre Dame segments because I try to
be real with you.
That are against my own personal beliefs in order to not come off as a homer on this show.
Okay. How do you look at Notre Dame, who can barely beat Mike Elko in game 1, year 1, the way that they do on the road, and South Carolina blows them out?
Notre Dame did that at Texas A&M at night.
In game 1,
South Carolina had
year
them at
1
home
under Mike Elko with not the same quarterback, and A&M blew them out. I mean,
there's a lot of mental gymnastics that have to come into making this argument.
NIU. South Carolina does not have a loss to NIU.
They played ODU awfully close. So we just going to throw that out the window?
It doesn't matter if it's up to you because wins got to matter. NIU.
Notre Dame would beat South Carolina.
We're worried about the South Carolina wins or losses that when they had them, when they come to Bama and Ole Miss, who are, by the way, 2 playoff teams. And I've got to add this. One team's got a loss to NIU.
I just can't believe I can't believe I have to be I have to be the realist in this conversation. I haven't heard a single person push that possible. They're not a playoff team.
Watch.
They won't get into the playoff.
I guarantee you, if there's a chance in hell that Indiana and South Carolina play right now today, they are going to beat the dog shit out of Indiana. It's going to happen. It's going.
Well, they're not going to play. They're not going to play them because Indiana's going to go to the playoff and South Carolina is not going.
You're smart enough to know that what you see in the trenches at Indiana is not what's going on at South Carolina.
Yeah, South Carolina's D-line is obviously very talented.
They're going to lift their hand.
They've been so productive. They have been extremely.
That ass.
You're
like a Diddy party with baby oil.
None of that would happen. That game would be so much closer than you would expect. This is what bothers me, and I know that you're laughing over that comment that you just made. This is what bothers me is the assumption, and like you're trying to accuse me of bias that I don't have. There's a natural assumption oftentimes by SEC fans that an undefeated team, just because they've had a lighter schedule, that you're a 3-loss team in your conference would blow them out. Like that's a little like obscene.
Okay. In all seriousness. And you can't tell me that 2 of the last losses are Ole Miss, in fairness, Ole Miss and Bama, and look at a team in Indiana with this kind of strength of schedule and it be in the 120s and tell me that that's okay. So you can't. I'm sorry you can't. I mean, at 102. Their strength of record is 120, whichever one. I get the 2 mixed up because it's 102, 120. It's not the same when you have a team that's in the top 5 in strength of record and strength of schedule. So you can say whatever you want. I get what you're trying to say. But in all fairness, I think it's unfair to say that a team is what the record says that they are. I don't believe that. Because again, if you getting tested, Joe, then I don't know what we're supposed to do here. I really don't. So hey, you know what? At the time that we played the teams, 7 of the 12 games that we're going to play are against top 15 ranked opponents.
I just don't think that.
Do you get what I'm saying, though?
I understand what you're saying, but like we can't just like the SEC should just have its own playoff then. Like that's where I can't get on board with most of this because the argument just automatically is, well, the SEC schedule is automatically harder and they automatically play tougher teams.
Oh, but no.
That means that this team is automatically better. That's what the argument is.
Do you think that Bama, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina have had tougher schedules and roads to the playoff than Ohio State, Indiana, Penn State? Just answer my question.
They have, but that's not what we're debating. That's not what they're debating. Stop. That's not what we're debating.
With you.
But I am debating with you that just because one team's strength of schedule is harder does not mean one team is automatically better than the other team.
No, but I see how they play against those teams. And I see when finally that they're tested against a tough football team that, oh, my pussy hurts.
I don't think that that's how that happens.
All right, I went a little too far on that last one. All right,
yeah.
Let's wrap it up here. Joe, what's wrong with LSU?
They suck. Sorry. Look, Blake, I'm not gonna take a victory lap again after last week. I'm not that type of a Notre Dame fan, and that wasn't even my tone last week. It was more so trying to diagnose what's wrong with Brian Kelly. There is so much that needs to be fixed, and it felt like watching a game where one team had the demeanor and the intent to win, and the other didn't. It just straight up didn't. There was not a lack of execution, and you saw that with their failures on special teams and the continued inability to complete operations on field goal. That's what we're talking about here. But what I look at with this game, because I think that LSU season's done, and they're going to turn the page. Brian Kelly's going to come back. He's not going to get fired. What does this mean for Billy Napier? Because there's this swinging pendulum of where they get. Yeah. Well, one, yes. And two, they get their asses kicked one week, and then the next week they put up a performance like this.
DJ Lagway.
I keep coming.
DJ.
I know. So that's what I'm
play against Texas. So I mean,
that's what I was going to say. Having DJ Lagway is like super important here. From what I have heard, DJ Lagway has no intention to leave, and he is going to stay with this Florida program. Big reason why they brought Billy Napier back. That's from what I have heard.
I mean, he told the telecast. He told the guy to rudely interrupt you.
Okay.
He told the telecast that. Yep.
He is a phenomenal football player, and he is what keeps them alive in football games. I don't expect them to be able to go out there and upset Ole Miss this week. But I really, truly wonder what they could put together with this roster in 2024 with a really brutal, or 2025 with a really brutal schedule that they're going to be facing again, with DJ Lagway leading the way, how good they could be. It's a very open-ended question. I don't really have a finite, fully cooked take with that, but the plays that kid makes are just ridiculous. He is one of the most gifted quarterbacks that I have seen in a very long time stepping as a true freshman.
Here's the thing, though, man. I'm with you. Florida fans are going to kill me on this. He didn't play a great game. He had 2 big shots, and he did. No, he didn't, Joe. He didn't.
He's a true freshman, though. He's a true freshman. Like,
okay, that sounds great. That sounds good. Everybody's anointing him, okay, for an accomplishment that, quite honestly, was subpar. Joe, he went 0 for 7 on 3rd down. He made a lot of bad decisions. That's going to get corrected with him the more that he plays. You know, and I know you can see the talent. He made some really good and big throws down the field in single coverage. He still was 13 of 26. He still did have the 1 touchdown, but the reason the yards are what they are with 13 completions is because LSU just could not cover. And that's the legitimate truth. He one-on-one, he was attacking downfield, and that's really great. Beautiful deep ball and beautiful accuracy. He just had a lot of throws that I'm sure he wishes that he had back. In reference to Florida, before we get to LSU, Joe, I continue week in, week out, see a team that they're not as talented as these other teams that they're playing. Joe, that was the seventh or eighth ranked opponent that they had played this year already. I mean, like, what do we do? I mean, maybe they could have gotten some wins here or there, but they're not ready for that. Joe, they got to go and get in the portal and get dudes because they got the quarterback. They got the running game. And they got the physicality and the buy-in. I just don't know if they can – what their expectations are because they're going to have to really go in the portal. LSU, for what it's worth, LSU lost this football game. I hate to say it like that, but they had 42 minutes of time of possession, did LSU. They blew it in every avenue. Every way that you can keep a team in the game is what they did. And so I know Florida's excited that they got the win. The God's honest truth, though, is, and you're probably going to beat Florida State and go to a bowl game, and I'm happy for Billy. You know, it's happy for everybody. Happy whatever. Ain't got nothing to do with the way that LSU blew this football game. And that's where it stands. And that's coming from an LSU guy, right? Like, hey, man, one team can't have the ball for almost or over 2/3 of the game, okay, 42 minutes, and them continuously not get points in the red zone, and you think to me that they weren't doing bad things. They were. Joe, look at how many times LSU got in the red zone and didn't convert. 24 plays they ran on third down. 24. That's how many times that they had the ball in third down situations. And I look at LSU, Joe, they're manufacturing ways to lose. People are going to say it's their O-line and the interior. I don't disagree. Defense has been suspect on communication. I disagree. I think they're soft. I think that they are well coached, but they don't have the mental toughness. They don't have the dudes. And then that falls on recruiting. Well, then you better go find them. Now, you got a top 5 class right now. You need to bring in other dudes. That's the bottom line. Mentally, they're weak. Physically, they're weak in certain situations. And, Joe, Garrett Nussmeier continues to turn the ball over in crucial situations. Did you see the photo that I posted today, by the way?
Yeah, the one of him getting sacked. Yeah.
Joe, I do a film study, and we talk about it every Monday. You tell me, you're unbiased to the situation. I know his running back got blown up, but it's a 3rd and 7. He's got to throw that ball. They had to kick a field goal there. That's the point that I'm trying to make. They are manufacturing ways to lose, bud. That's it.
Well, a lot of their offensive inefficiencies and issues we've discussed do come down to Nussmeier's mistakes. Like
every game comes down to his mistakes, Joe.
They 100%
comes down to it.
Look, I'm going to take this a step further.
Uh-oh.
If Underwood comes in, I think he starts. Like I think he should start over Nussmeier.
Yes.
I don't know if Nussmeier declares for the draft, and I've stated this before. He is not a first-round prospect, nor should he be. I know that some folks deem him such, but he's not. He's not. I know you can watch this final stretch of games and think that there's something there that can be unlocked for him to pan out to be at least somebody who's comparable traits-wise in Mac Jones, won a national championship, and you can say that the guy's a winner. Garrett Nussmeier does not have that. I think it's in Nussmeier's best interest to transfer. Just plain and simple, to be as blunt as possible.
Whoa.
He's not. It's not gonna work. And if Underwood's supposed to be as gifted as he is, he should start. We have seen.
All right, that came from you, LSU fans. That came from Joe. It didn't come from me. I'm not taking the beating on that one. I'm sorry, I'm not.
We've seen true freshmen have impacts on talented rosters. I don't think that there's a possibility for them to win a national championship with a true freshman starting at quarterback, but I think you get sure of a hell of a better chance than Garrett Nussmeier.
I mean, it's not all on him. I can't put it all on him because it's not all on him. But some of these crucial situations, I mean, Joe, everybody said LSU can't run the football. That both of their backs combined had 160 rushing yards. By the way, Brian Kelly got involved in play calling yesterday. I'm going to throw this out. That didn't work. No, I'm going to be real with you. BS. It actually did. They're not executing. Like, you can't get down to the red zone 5 times and line up for field goals. Every time that this offense gets in crunch situations, they fold.
That's fair. That's a fair
I mean,
point.
they're just simply not executing. We can blame BK all we want. And you know what? You're right. On the surface, it is all of him because he puts his team together. From a play calling aspect, Joe BS. I'm going to be, can I be real with you? That's one of the better LSU call games I've seen in a hot minute.
I don't have enough perspective on that to
Some of the shit that they were running was insane. Like, how did BK know that they were going to do a slot blitz there? Like, what told him to change and then go into the flat and attack this and attack that? But, Joe, the problem was when BK would call the right play or suggest a right play, Joe Garrett's not hitting it. I don't know how else to talk about it. I don't. He's just not. Joe, the picture that I showed is classic. It's 3rd and 7. Okay? You got to throw that football. Give your guy a chance. I don't get it, man. I
don't disagree. I'm on your side of this.
Good job, Billy. You're gonna probably go to a bowl game here. All right, we'll see you guys again tomorrow. Joe, another really good week here. Big 12 talk on the way. I'm Blake Ruffino. This is Joe DeLeone. We will see y'all again tomorrow. Y'all have a good night. Peace.